In the dark shadows and in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast, we are the brave and bold. The candidate is divested of all wearing apparel except his shirt and his drawers. If he has not the latter, he is furnished with a pair by the brethren preparing him. The drawers are rolled up just above the candidate's knees, and both arms are taken out of the shirt sleeves, leaving his legs and breast bare. A rope, technically called by Masons a cable tow, is wound around his body 3 times, and a bandage or hoodwink is tied very closely over his eyes. When the candidate is prepared, the deacon takes him by the left arm and leads him up to the door of the lodge and gives 3 loud, distinct knocks. The senior deacon, who has stationed himself at the inner door at the right of the senior warden, upon hearing these raps, rises to his feet and makes the sign of the master mason to the master and says, "Worshipful master, while engaged in the lawful pursuit of masonry, there is an alarm at the inner door of our lodge." The worshipful master says, "You will attend to the alarm and ascertain the cause." And the senior deacon gives 3 loud knocks, which are responded to by 1 from the outside parties, and the senior deacon answers with 1 rap and opens the door. Who comes here? Brother Gabe, who has been regularly initiated, entered apprentice, passed to the degree of fellow craft, and now wishes to receive further light in masonry by being raised to the sublime degree of master mason. Brother Gabe, is it of your own free will and accord? It is. Brother Junior Deacon, is he worthy and well qualified? He is. Duly and truly prepared? He is. Has he made suitable proficiency in the preceding degrees? He has. And properly vouched for? He is. Who vouches for him? A brother. And by what further right or benefit does he expect to gain admission? By the benefit of the password. He has the password. He has it not, but I have it for him. Advance and give it to me. And the junior deacon here steps forward and whispers in the senior deacon's ear 2 words. Tubal Cain.
The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Yeah! Tubal what? Tubal Cain. Greetings and welcome to the American Sermon. My name is John Towers, and I will be your worshipful master for this evening. This is a spin-off of my regular show, which is called the Abracast. You could find it, everywhere. This is going to be a limited series, and we're looking specifically at the occult founding of the United States of America. Hey, so some of the things we're going to talk about tonight might cause a knee-jerk reaction, or you might have a problem with it, depending on your relationship with Freemasonry or your views on religion or the Bible. if you're looking for someone to, ramble on around secret codes of dollar bills or speculate what the all-seeing eye means on the top of the pyramid, this is not the podcast, for this kind of stuff. I'm wading into these myths, and I'm not tethered to the common way that we look at these things. So I'm kind of checking ethics and morality at the door. So when we get into, revering Cain or, Satan, I'm not saying that is necessarily bad or evil. And we're talking about the people that, worship Jehovah. I'm not necessarily saying that is good. These stories put themselves into context, and I think the episodes will bear that out. So, with all that being said, I do hope you stick around. And we were looking specifically at Freemasonry tonight, but only as like a beginning to get into our story. You see, this story goes all the way back to the beginning. The featured books for tonight's episode, there's a few that's not on my list either, but The Temple Legend by Rudolph Steiner, 1904, Freemasons and Catholicism by Max Hiendal, 1919, History of Freemasonry by Albert Mackey, 1898, and threw in here The Legend of the Jews by Louis Ginsberg, 1909. It's important for me to note here that Ginsberg is not writing from a Masonic point of view, but he has a point of view on some of the details of the story we're going to be talking about tonight. So it's hard to deny in our world today that these Freemasons had a huge role in the creation of our country, the Revolutionary War, the drafting of these founding documents, figuring out how the government would work, etc. So because this isn't like a Dan Brown kind of thing, this isn't like a, holy blood, holy grail sort of thing. We're coming at this from what I want to be a pretty accessible point of view. So I busted open my International Encyclopedia for Secret Societies and Fraternal Orders by this guy, Alan Axelrod. I'm just going to skip through this real fast because there's a lot here. So Freemasons, just about everything concerning Freemasonry is shrouded in mystery, or even the more impenetrable Nacht und Nebel, the Masonic pietism, operative stoneworking, Masons banded together in the 14th century or earlier, while accepted Masonry began in about 1600 and became important about a century later. Today, there are probably 10 million adherents worldwide. Freemasonry is unquestionably the largest, oldest, and most influential of all of these secret societies. Here, such it warrants the longest single entry in the work. I know, Jesus fucking Christ, as well as a number of subsidiary entries. Precisely because it is so large and old and so influential, Freemasonry also has the best documented of all secret societies. So we're going to skip ahead to the origin. The Masons who worked on the great medieval cathedrals and to a lesser extent the palaces, bridges, and other public works were necessarily itinerant. They typically range all over Europe, neither noble nor serf. They were not bound to any one place, and they were truly Freemasons. Wherever they gathered to work, they established lodges. At first, they probably rented rooms at inns or rented a house, although in the larger cities there was plenty of work. They might eventually buy property. All right, so they're assembling these lodges wherever they go. The secrets of we're jumping ahead again. The original secrets of Freemasonry were almost certainly trade secrets, probably combined with mutual assistance in the form of names and contacts and so forth. through a panoply of ritual and ornament, had grown up as early as the 14th century. It was consolidated in the 15th. A text of 1425 that names Euclid as the founder of Masonry and traces the craft back to the Tower of Babel and the Temple of Solomon. So we're talking about the founding Masons. It's in the mid 1700s. So this text linking them back to the Tower of Babel, which is going to be important next episode, and the Temple of Solomon, which is going to be important this episode, goes all the way back to 1425. And that is a question that I actually had when I was preparing this: is when was this Masonic legend that we're going to be talking about introduced? So the featured books of this episode are old, right? But they're not 1425 old, but they're talking about the same legend. Skipping ahead, Masonry in the 18th century. In 1717, 4 London lodges united to form the United Grand Lodge, and their authority rapidly spread throughout England and into the colonies. Booyah Tribe. I also found, I busted out my Masonic dictionary for this episode. Of course I would. And I found Tubal Cain in here. Let me see. Tubal Cain. Before the general deluge, there was a man called Lamech who had 2 wives, and one called Ada and the other called Zillah. By Ada he had 2 sons, Jabal and Jubal. And by Zillah he had a son called Tubal and a daughter called Mahma. These 4 children found the beginning of all the crafts of the world. Jabal found out geometry and had divided flocks of sheep and lambs and built the first house and stones, and Jubal found music. Tubal found out the smith's trading or craft, and also the working of gold, silver, copper, iron, and steel. And while we're here, I'm just going to, let's see, and do Solomon's Temple, since that's is going to figure in big time later. Solomon's Temple is, this is the most important symbol to Freemasonry. For in its time, it was considered as the most regular and most magnificent building. Solomon built the temple at Jerusalem, and it was not only a palace for worship of God, but also a dwelling for the priesthood and depository for the ark. David provided a great quantity of the building materials and left an enormous sum of money to pay the expenses for the building, which was carried out in perfect quietness. All the stone and the wood were prepared without the city and brought into Jerusalem. The foundation was laid in the year of the world 2993. And at that time, the Phoenicians possessed the best artists in every description. And in architecture, they took the lead of all other nations in order, therefore, to build the temple accordingly to the best rules of architecture then known. Solomon requested Hiram, the king of Tyre, to furnish him with an architect, and he sent him one who was called Hiram. Hiram not only possessed scientific knowledge, but also sufficient practical skill to his art to enable him to make everything according to the wish of King Solomon, who, as well in the building of the temple with regard to the magnificence, as also in originality of formation. It was this appropriateness of the sacred vessels which were necessary in the sacrifices and the burnt offerings, and which were all formed in strict proportion according to the rules of geometry. The walls that surrounded the temple were 7,700 feet in circumference. Okay, the large and noble hall stood to the west, and the holiest of holies to the east. All right. And so the cold open for tonight's show which was actually the start of the Masonic ceremony of a brother who was a fellow craft or second-degree Mason, and he was going to become the Master Mason or a third-degree Mason. This was lifted from me right out of Duncan's Ritual and Monitor. The ceremony goes on to become the story of this widow's son, this Master Mason Hiram Abiff, who was the guy in charge of building the Solomon's Temple that we just heard of. The Freemasons revere Hiram Abiff because he is the central figure of their story. Anyways, as initiate sort of takes the place of Hiram Abiff as the ceremony goes forward, because he now knows the Master Mason code word, these three lesser workers start fucking giving him shit. They start trying to hassle him for his code, which we know is Tubal Cain. And they wind up bashing Hiram's head in and hiding his body and making a break for it. But I just wanted to stop at the Master Mason code word because it is how we're going to get into all this stuff. So let's start our journey together with these three questions. Who is Tubal Cain? Who is Hiram Abiff? And why do these Freemasons dig these guys so fucking much? And the answer lies, like I said, in the very beginning. So let's kick it off with Max Hiendal's Freemasonry and Catholicism. Okay, according to the Bible, our earliest parents were forbidden to eat the tree of knowledge, but Eve, seduced by the serpent, did eat, and later induced the man to follow her example. Who the serpents are and what the tree of knowledge is may also be determined from certain passages in the Bible. We are told, for instance, that Christ exhorted his disciples to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. The so-called curse pronounced upon Eve after her confession declares that she must bear her children in sorrow and pain, and that the race will die. It has always been a great stumbling block in Bible commentators as to what connection there could be between eating the apple, death, and the painful parturition. But when we are acquainted with the chaste expressions of the Bible, which designates the creative act by such passages as Adam knew Eve and she bore Abel. How can I bear a child seeing I know not a man, etc.? It is very evident that the tree of knowledge is a symbolical expression for the creative act, i.e., fuck the fucking. Then it is plain that the serpents taught Eve how to perform the creative act and that Eve instructed Adam. Uh-oh, where's John going? Why is he spinning off into this weird... So, this provocative stuff, I should say, these are the old books. This isn't stuff that I'm getting off of Ancient Aliens or Dan Brown and so forth. We are talking about the institution and the culture of Freemasonry. I'm not saying here that Freemasons are running around venerating a child of Satan or whatever. It's going to sound like that's what I'm doing, but that's not what I'm doing when this is all said and done. You know, I drink with Freemasons, and when I get together with them and I start talking about this stuff, they all look at me like I'm insane. And I'm just reading ancient tomes, bros. You know, that's all I'm doing. So this is just the beginning. Let's get weirder. In the essence and task of Freemasonry from the point of spiritual science. Oh boy. Rudolph Steiner says, one of the Elohim united himself with Eve, and out of this union of a divine creative spirit with Eve, Cain was born. And then another of the Elohim, Jehovah or Adonai, created Adam, who is to be regarded as the primal man of the third root race. This Adam then united himself with Eve, and from this union, Abel was born. Thus, at the offset of human evolution, there are two starting points. Cain, the direct descendant of one of the Elohim with Eve, and Abel, who, with the help of a divinely created human being, Adam, is the true representative of Yehovah. Yod-He, Vo-He, the Tetragrammaton. It is important here that when we look at the word Elohim, which is like a term for God that's used when we're talking about this creation story, Elohim is both male and female, and subsequently it is also a plural. So, take that however you want. So these two competing races or whatever are called fire people or whatever, and water people or whatever. And there's this whole giant story in the temple legend about how when Lucifer and his angels fell, they became fire spirits, and the good angels, I guess, were water, or the angels that didn't fall. I mean, let's get morality out of this right away. The angels that didn't fall were water spirits. So now we see that this is echoing into the human realm or whatever. There's this whole giant story in the temple legend about what King Solomon and Hiram Abiff were actually doing when they were constructing this Temple of Solomon. They were actively reuniting or creating a union, or attempting to create a union of these two principles, uniting the priestly and the kingly, uniting the heavenly and the material, uniting the hot and the cold, uniting the water and the fire. What Crowley says, the goal of all magic is the unification of opposites. Back to it though, Ginsberg in in volume 1, chapter 3 of Legend of the Jews has a slightly different, or maybe more specific take on it here. The Elohim in question are different angels, which is also almost this Gnostic idea. It's like that God wasn't that it wasn't God that messed everything up. The mistake was from these lesser beings. The Gnostics would call them a demiurge. It's kind of like the little fellows and time bandits. Like that would, I don't even understand how that would absolve God as a perfect being by letting a flawed being create the world that's supposed to be perfect. Like the flawed corruption, it's supposed to make everything perfect. So why is he making a flawed or lesser being make the thing that's supposed to be perfect anyways? He's culpable either way, I think. Anyways, okay, we're getting into Ginsberg. The 10 generations, the birth of Cain. There were 10 generations from Adam to Noah. To show how long suffering is the Lord, for all the generations provoked him unto wrath, until he brought the deluge upon them. We're skipping ahead a little bit. Wickedness came into the world with the first being born of a woman, Cain, the oldest son of Adam. When God bestowed paradise upon the first pair of mankind, he warned them particularly against carnal intercourse with each other. But after the fall of Eve, Satan, in the guise of the serpent, approached her. And the fruit of their union was Cain. And the ancestors of all impious generations that were rebellious towards God and rose up against him. Cain's descent from Satan, who was the angel Samael, who was revealed in his Sephiroth appearance at his birth. The exclamation was wrung from Eve, "I've gotten a man through this angel of the Lord." Adam, who was not in the company of Eve during the time of her pregnancy with Cain, because she goes off on this side quest where she travels the earth and all this. And when Cain was born, well, here, I'll just let the angel tell us. "Make ready to give birth to thy child." Immediately her son was born, a radiant figure, a little a little while, and the babe stood up on his feet and ran off and returned, holding in his hands a stalk of straw, for which he gave to his mother for the reason that he was named Cain, the Hebrew word for a stalk of straw. Now Adam took Eve and the boy to his home in the east, and God sent him various kinds of seeds, and by the hand of the angel Michael, he was taught how to cultivate the ground and to make it yield produce and fruits, and to sustain himself and his family in his posterity. After a while, Eve bore a second son, who she named Abel, because because she said he was born but to die. So this would make Cain what we would eventually come to call or be known as the Nephilim, the offspring between an angel and an earth chick. You know, it's always these fucking earth chicks, man. So, in a way, Cain here is a widow's son, just like Hiram Abiff is going to be in his story is a widow's son. Horus and Harpocrates is a widow's son, and Jesus is a widow's son, and we have these fucking widow sons everywhere. Now back to Steiner. The whole conception underlying... Hold on, The whole conception underlying the creation story, according to the temple legend, is based on the fact that there is a kind of enmity between Jehovah and everything which is derived from the other Elohim and their descendants, the sons of fire. This being the designation from the descendants of Cain, according to the temple legend. Jehovah creates enmity between Cain and his race and Abel and his race. And the outcome of this was that Cain slew Abel. This is the arch enmity which exists between those who receive their existence from the divine worlds, or those who work out everything for themselves. See, that this is a key passage. They receive their existence from the divine worlds, or those who work out everything for themselves. That's the sons of water and the sons of fire. The fact that Abel makes a sacrifice of an animal to Jehovah, while Cain brings the fruit of the earth, is an illustration which the Bible gives to this contrast between the races of Cain and the races of Abel. Cain has to wrest from the earth with the hard labor of the fruits which are necessary for the sustenance of mankind. Abel takes what is already living, that he has been prepared for his livelihood. The race of Cain creates, as it were, the living out of the lifeless, and Abel takes up what is already alive and what is already imbued with the breath of life. Abel's sacrifice is pleasing to God, but Cain's is not. Thus, we find the two kinds of humans being characterized in Cain and Abel. The one constant of those who accept that God has prepared for them. The others, the free humanity, are those who till the soil and labor to win living products out of what is lifeless. So the first time I was exposed to this, or the first time I found this material, I was like, what the fuck? He just flipped the whole script on everything. To those who regard themselves as the son of Cain, they are who understand the temple legend and wish to live by it. Out of their race, Cain sprang all of those who are the creators of the arts and the sciences of mankind. Tubal Cain, who was the first true architect and the god of the smithies and the working tools, and also Hiram Abiff, or Adoni Hiram, who is the hero of the temple legend. This Hiram is sent for by King Solomon, famous for his wisdom, who belongs to the race of Abel. Those who receive their wisdom from God, thus is the contrast appears once more in the court of Solomon. Solomon the wise and Hiram the independent worker who has achieved his wisdom through human striving. I can't go any further just now. We got to deal with the elephant that's in the room. After the burnt offerings to God, where Cain was sort of dissed by God and Abel was given props, even though Cain was the eldest. Wow, this is the first one of these. In the Abercast, we've been doing a series on Genesis, and as we're going through them, I've been tracking this idea that there's this weird thing. I bring it up all the time whenever I find it. The younger brother always gets the blessing, and that's counterintuitive to the way it's supposed to work. It's always supposed to work that the older male son gets the blessing. I need to look harder at this, I think. Sorry. Even though Abel just herds the sheep and whatever, and Cain does all this hard work of the land, making 2 blades of grasses where there was only one and all this stuff we're going to get into, he felt dissed that God didn't like his offering. I remember being so confused about all this when I was in church. Like, they made it seem like he just walked up and threw down some sticks and was like, "Brah, that's what you got." So one thing led to another, and Cain bashed Abel's head in with a rock, and he gets in trouble, and he goes on, he gets marked and cursed. Now he must walk the earth forever, trapped in his material body. He takes off, he winds up getting a wife, and he gets a son, and he names his son Enoch, not to be confused with the character Enoch, who later goes up to heaven without dying and is given a divine angelic power armor, totally different Enoch. And then he goes on and he builds the first city, which he also calls Enoch. Again, not to be confused with this angelic power armor Enoch guy. So now I can move on a little bit. After Abel was murdered, Adam and Eve had another son together, and the second son was Seth. And he went on to have descendants, and they went on to eventually produce David and King Solomon. So Seth became the representative of the line of Jehovah that Abel was supposed to become, I guess. Gets confusing. Then, and then Cain and his descendants, too, that would eventually produce artists and workers, and eventually the Grand Master Mason himself, Hiram Abiff. In the Legend of the Jews, Ginsberg writes to the line of Cain. Remember, Ginsberg stuff is the only stuff that's not written from a Masonic point of view. And I just throw it in here because it's kind of probably like the common wisdom, like the popular theory, so it gets into it here. Like the first couple sentences are hilarious. The corruptness of the times, and especially the depravity of Cain's stock, appear in the fact that Lamech, as well as the men in the generations of the deluge, married 2 wives, one with the purpose of rearing children, and the other in order to pursue carnal indulgences, for which reason the latter was rendered sterile by artificial means. As the men of the time were intent upon pleasure rather than desirous of doing their duty to the human race, they gave all their love and attention to the barren women, while their other wives spent their days like what? Widows, joyless and in gloom. The 2 wives of Lamech, Ada and Zillah, bore him each 2 children. Ada 2 sons, Jubal and Jubal, and Zillah's son Tubal Cain, and a daughter Namia. Jubal was the first among men to erect temples to idols, and Jubal invented the music sung and played therein. Tubal Cain was rightly named, for he completed the work of his ancestor Cain. Cain committed murder, and Tubal Cain the first who knew how to sharpen iron and copper, furnished to the instruments used in the wars and combats. Freemason Hiendal puts a finer point on it. After the future in store with the sons of Cain and their followers, the temple legend is also most eloquent. It states that from Cain descended Methuselah, who invented writing, Tubal Cain's cunning worker in metals, and Jubal, who originated music. In short, the sons of Cain are the originators of arts and crafts. Let me reread that, because the way I read it, it makes it sound like they're gluing fucking macaroni to construction paper. The sons of Cain are the originators of the arts and crafts. I don't know if that sounds any better. The idea that he's just sitting around gluing macaroni to construction paper is pretty good. Therefore, when Jehovah chose Solomon, the scion of the race of Seth, to build a house for his name, the sublime spirituality of a long line of divinely guided ancestors flowered into the conception of the magnificent temple called Solomon's Temple. Although Solomon has not only the instruments to carry out the divine plan revealed by Jehovah to David, but Solomon was unable to execute the divine design in concrete form. Therefore, it became necessary for him to apply to King Hiram of Tyre, the descendant of Cain, who selected Hiram Abiff, the son of a widow, as all Freemasons are called, because of the relation of their divine progenitor with Eve. Hiram Abiff then became Grand Master of the Army of Construction. In him, the arts and crafts of all the sons of Cain who had gone on before him had flowered, and he was skilled beyond all others in the works of the world, without which the plan of Jehovah must have remained forever a divine dream and could never have become a concrete reality. The worldly acumen of the sons of Cain was as necessary to the completion of this temple as the spiritual conception of the sons of Seth. As therefore, during the period of construction, the two classes joined forces. This is magic. This is alchemy, the combining of opposites. Remember, the underlying enmity between, or being hidden under a superficial show of amity, which means friendship, you know. It was indeed the first attempt to unite them, and had that been accomplished, the world history from then on would have been altered in a very material manner. Hey guys, John here. Thank you for tuning in to the first couple episodes of the American Sermon. I appreciate it. And if you don't know, the American Sermon is a spinoff of a podcast called the Abercast. So if you like the ideas and the topics that we're talking about here, I would definitely invite you to check out the Abercast. You can find the Abercast literally everywhere. We're still rolling out here at the American Sermon, but you can find it at iTunes, Stitcher, any podcast catcher, iHeartRadio, fucking anything. It's there. You can find the Abercast easy. So as a celebratory thing, we're actually launching a contest this month. It's called the Vessel of the Art Giveaway. It is this fine mason jar. You hear me guzzling and stuff during the show. This is actually the Vessel of the Art. It's a fine glass mason jar with the Abercast logo on it. There'll be some other swag in there for sure. And so, next time you mix up a drink, so sit down and listen to the show with, you can mix it up into this fucking bad boy right here. Whip it up in this sweet ass mason jar. So what do you have to do? It's easy, bros. It's very easy. Check it out. All you got to do is you leave a 5-star review for the American Sermon. I guess you can leave a 5-star review for the Abercast too if you want. Hey, why don't you do both? Increase your chances. So a 5-star review, not just a rating on iTunes. Take a screenshot, throw it up on Instagram, tag a friend who you would think would like the show or shows, and tag hashtag Vessel of the Art. And you'll also want to have to tag me. You'll tag me, Stigmata Studios, in there too. But hashtag Vessel of the Art is the important one. And then to start also this month, we're doing this thing that I'm calling the Gin Joint. The Gin Joint is going to be right now. It's a monthly, maybe Facebook go live. It'll be simulcast also on YouTube or Instagram, one of those two. So if you don't like Facebook, you're not left out. So you want to go find the Abercast Facebook page. You want to find the Abercast YouTube channel and the Stigmata Studios Instagram. So join us and come on to the Gin Joint. And we're going to go ahead it's on March 20th. There's one scheduled in April 17th. March 20th and April 17th. They're two scheduled. And we'll be picking winners probably on both of those dates. So go ahead and find us and join us there. Sign into the mailing list. If you go to abercast.com, you can sign into the mailing list. You get some bonus material. What happens is it sends you a link to a secret part of the website where there's tons of graphics and worksheets and stuff scanned in there for just the extra bonus content, graphical content. Yeah, so that's it. Thanks. Sorry, I ran out of gin. I had to take a pit stop. Where were we? The sons of Cain descended from the fiery Lucifer spirits, were naturally proficient in the use of fire. By it, the metals hoarded by Solomon and his ancestors were melted into altars, lavers, and vessels of various kinds. Pillars were fashioned by workmen under the direction of Hiram Abiff, and the arches are to rest upon them. The great edifice was nearing completion when he had made ready to cast what they called the molten sea, which was to be the crowning effort. His masterpiece. It was in the construction of this great work that the treachery of the sons of Seth became manifest and frustrated the divine plan of reconciliation. They tried to quench the fire used by Hiram Abiff with their natural weapon, water, and it almost succeeded. We're going to get into this story. There's this whole bit in here that I kind of cut around, and it all had to do with the Queen of Sheba. So besides these guys being opposites, there was a piece of ass in the middle. Like, they were like, Solomon wanted to fuck the Queen of Sheba, and Tubal-Cain wanted to fuck the Queen of Sheba. So there was like a fulcrum, I guess, between these two. I cut that out for length. I mean, I don't even think I'm halfway done with this, so we're running along already. So I want to just cutting that out. But just keep that in the back of your mind, that besides all this shenaniganism between these two forces, there was also a jealousy and a piece of a love triangle, if you will. Back to Steiner. The spiritual sons of Seth flowered in Solomon, in his line, the churchmen. and the spiritual sons of Cain flowered in Hiram Abiff and his line of craftsmen. And these Freemasons were not venerating the Solomon, they were venerating Abiff. I'm talking about these Freemasons, like the Freemasons of the founding, you know what I mean? So they are like the Temple of Solomon is like the most important thing, but it's not because of the Solomon part, it's because of the Hiram Abiff part. I think it's pretty clear by now. Anyhow, so God divinely inspires or beams these plans or these ideas of the Temple of Solomon into Solomon's head, and this is an echo of Abel or Seth. Abel didn't have to do anything. He didn't create the sheep. He just fucking herds them, you know. So Solomon gets a hold of this master mason. In some accounts we're talking about tonight, he's kingly also. He's the king of Tyre, Hiram the king of Tyre. Solomon gets Abiff to figure out how to accomplish this idea that God downloaded into him. And Hiram Abiff is the echo of Cain, who works the land and builds the city and is the father of these arts. These Freemasons are not venerating Solomon, they are venerating Abiff. And I think that's fascinating. These are in the way of these uniting these sons of fire and the sons of water here to create this temple. So let's get to the end of our story here. Hiram decides he's going to build this giant, this molten sea, they call it. It's like this giant bronze salad bowl that sits on top of, I think, 12 giant oxen, and they call it the molten sea. And it's like this really, really big deal. Back to Hiendal. Hiendal talks here. Yeah, man. In the ancient age, when Cain and Abel first found themselves upon the earth, and Abel condemnedly cared for the flocks, created like himself and his parents, Adam and Eve by Jehovah, but in Cain, the semi-divine progeny of the Lucifer spirit, Samael and Eve, the creature of Jehovah, divine incentive to original effort, burned. He tilled the field and made 2 blades of grass glow. 2 blades of grass grow where only one grew before. The creative instinct must have expression. Hiram being the focus of and having inherited of all the crafts of Cain. He was also invested with the spirit of Samael. In other places earlier in our story was called the devil, the Satan, intensified and commiserate ratio. Therefore, he was consumed by an overpowering urge to add something to the temple that would eclipse the rest of the structure in beauty and importance. Out of this travail of his spirit, he was born the conception of the molten sea. And this great ideal he proceeded to carry into execution through heaven and earth, held their breath in awe at the audacity of his purpose. They were like, that motherfucker Hiram Abiff is just gone too far with this molten sea business. The Bible gives very little information about this molten sea. In 2 Chronicles, the 4th chapter, we learn that Hiram made such a vessel, and that it was considerable size, and that it stood upon 12 oxen, there we go, arranged so that their heads were at the periphery of the circular basin, and their hind parts were towards its center. Hey, I've seen movies like that. It was intended solely for the use by the priests. Much is said of the nature to bewilder the reader, but above salient points prove the signal importance of this instrument. We, as we shall see when we study and compare the Masonic accounts with this veiled word of the Bible, the Masonic story runs as follows. When Hiram had about completed the temple, he commenced to cast the various vessels required in the service according to the designs made by Solomon as the agent of Jehovah. Chief among these was the great laver, intended to hold the bath of purification through which all priests must pass to enter the service of the Lord. This and all the lesser vessels were successfully cast by Hiram as recorded in the Bible. But there is an important distinction between the vessel and the molten sea, which it was designed by Hiram to contain. And until that had been successfully poured, the vessel was without virtue. So far as purifying properties were concerned, until then it could no more cleanse the sin-stained soul. Say that 5 times fast. Cleanse the sin-stained soul. Cleanse the sin-stained soul, then could a dry basin be utilized to cleanse the body, nor could Solomon speak the word, the formula for this wonderful work. None but Hiram knew it. This work was to be his masterpiece, and if he succeeded, his art would have lifted him above the human and made him divine, like the Elohim, Jehovah in the Garden of Eden. The divine progenitor Samael had assured his mother Eve that she might become as the Elohim if she ate of the tree of knowledge. For ages his ancestors had wrought the world, and through the accumulated skill the sons of Cain and Edifice had been reared, wherein Jehovah hid himself behind the veil and communed only with his chosen priests, the son of Seth. And the sons of Cain were thrust out of the temple which they had built, and as their father Cain had been driven from the garden which he had tilled. This Hiram felt to be an outrage and an injustice, so he applied himself to prepare the means whereby the sons of Cain might rend the veil and open the way to God for whosoever will. To this end, I was just trying to find this rend the veil thing. This is from Hiendal, and you can tell because, well, the book that we're reading from Hiendal is about Freemasonry and Catholicism, and he jumps through these wild hoops sometimes to fit Jesus in here. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But this rend the veil passage is a direct reference to Jesus as he's dying on the cross up on Calvary. To this end, he sent messengers all over the world to collect all the metals with which the sons of Cain had ever wrought. And with his hammer, he pulverized them and placed them in a fiery furnace to extract by alchemistry from each particle the quintessence of knowledge derived in the experience of working with it. Thus he combined quintessence of the various base metals would form a spiritual sublimate of knowledge, incomparable in potency, valuable beyond all earthly things. Being of ultimate purity, it would contain no color, but resemble a sea of glass. Whoever should lave in it would find himself endowed with perpetual youth. No philosopher could compare with him in wisdom. This white stone knowledge would even enable him to lift the veil of invisibility and meet the supernatural hierarchs who work in the world with a potency undreamt of by the masses. These Masonic traditions tell us that Hiram's preparations were so perfect that success would have been assured if not treachery had triumphed. But in Competent craftsmen whom Hiram had been unable to initiate into the higher degrees conspired to pour water into the vessel cast to receive the molten sea, for they knew that the son of fire was unskilled in the manipulation of the watery element. One could not combine it with the wonderful alloy, thus by frustrating Hiram's cherished plan and spoiling his masterpiece, they aimed to revenge themselves upon the master. Solomon had privately informed of the nefarious plot, but jealously, on the account of Queen Sheba, bound his tongue and stayed his arm. For he hoped that when the ambitious plan of Hiram failed, the affections of the queen would turn from his humiliated rival to himself. He therefore closed his eyes and his ears to plot and plotters. When Hiram confidently pulled the plugs, the liquid fire rushed out, met by the water. And there was a roar that seemed to shake the heavens and the earth. And while the elements boiled and battled, all but Hiram hid their faces in the awful havoc. Then from the center of the raging fire, he heard the call of Tubal Cain, bidding him to jump into the molten sea. Full of faith in his ancestor who had gone before him, he stood on the path of fire, and Hiram obeyed and plunged fearlessly into the flames. Sinking through the disintegrating bottom of the vessel, he was conducted successfully through 9 arch-like layers of the earth into the center. This motherfucker jumped into the center of the earth because his ancestor told him to. Where he found himself in the presence of Cain, the founder of his family, who gave him instructions relative to blending water and fire, and who furnished him with a new hammer and a new word which would enable him to produce these results. Cain looked into the future and uttered a prophecy by which has been partially fulfilled, but remains in the process of realization day by day, and as surely as time goes on will come to pass. You, Hiram, said Cain, are destined to die with hopes unfulfilled. By many sons will be born to the widow, and keep your memory green through the ages, and at length one will come who is greater than you. You shall not wake till the Lion of Judah raises you with the powerful grip of his paw. This is Jesus stuff again. This day you shall receive your baptism of fire, but he shall baptize you with water and with spirit. You and with every son of the widow who will come to him greater than Solomon. We will build a new city and a temple whereon the nations may worship. The sons of Cain and the sons of Set shall meet there in peace at the sea of glass. And as Melchizedek, the king of Salem and the priest of God, ministered to Abraham and his father of nations when mankind was yet in its infancy, so shall this new light combine in himself the dual office of king and priest. After the order of Melchizedek, we shall judge the nations with the laws of love. And to him that overcometh will be given the white stone with a name that will serve as a passport to the temple. There may meet the king face to face. And Hiram was again conducted to the surface of the earth, where he walked from the scene of his shattered ambition. The conspirators set upon and fatally wounded him. And before he expired, he hid the hammer in the disc upon which he inscribed the word. This was never found until ages later, when Hiram, the widow's son, was reborn as Lazarus and became the friend and pupil of the Lion of Judah, who raised him from death through initiation. And when the hammer was found, it took the shape of a cross, and the disc had become a rose. Therefore, Hiram took his place among the immortals under the new and symbolic name. So this is Hiendal. Like I said, he goes on here, and he gets a little dicey, in my opinion, with his attempt to jam Freemasonry together with Catholicism, especially back in the old days. These old days that we're talking about, like the founding, Freemasons really didn't talk about Jesus. They talked about God. They talked about God all the time, but not too much stuff about Jesus. Like look in the founding documents and stuff. You'll find God. You hardly ever find a Jesus. Jesus. You hardly ever find a Jesus Christ, the master of the ages, amen. This stuff that he's railing on about Melchizedek in this allusion to Jesus, dicey as I might find it. Actually, the story ends in just the right place. You see, okay. Fuck. My cat distracted me. Melchizedek was in this story of the War of the Nine Kings, or this War of Siddim, or what I've called World War Zero in the past. And it took place between the city of the plains after the Tower of Babel incident went down. However, this king, Melchizedek, enters the story, and he's described as this priest king with an office. This is an office that appears nowhere else in the Old Testament. This guy is, he's an attempt to merge, as we see here. The Temple of Solomon is to merge the water and the fire, to merge the churchmen with the craftsmen, to merge the kingly and the priestly. And we follow this, and what we see Hiendal saying here, or alluding to here, is that Jesus Christ was the merging of these two lines. In Matthew, I've got to say, I'm a full disclosure kind of dude, and my strength really is in the Old Testament, okay? But in the Gospels, Matthew, I believe, Jesus is out there and he's talking about destroying the temple over and over again. And when he would destroy the temple, he would become this meeting place of these two principles. He's from the line of David through his mother. We know that, and I guess his father would be an Elohim. So it's like Dune, bros. He's like the Kwisatz Haderach. He's like the shortening of the way. So I'm going to leave you with this idea that I have in the wake of all this weirdness, right? And it's this idea that these Freemasons, and Hiendal, I think he kind of talks about it when he's talking about their meeting in a brand new city in this in a place with a peacefulness like glass. I think these Freemasons that helped found America as this new temple, just like the Temple of Solomon, as a combination of these two lines or these two principles: the priest and the king, the water and the fire, the churchmen and the craftsmen. Just like Solomon's temple, the vision of it was the inspiration of it was divine, sent down from God, and these master craftsmen, just like Hiram Abiff, sat down and made it a reality. It's a great work of magic, the combining of these opposites. And they combined the water and the fire, and they combined the people in their government. And just like Hiram Abiff, they walked out of this calamity with this new hammer and this new word. The hammer, the United States, and the word liberty. That last part might be a little over the top. Well, if any of you guys want to unpack some of the topics we talked about here tonight, please head over to abercast.com. There's a featured topic link. And if you go, it's basically like a listing of my episodes by category. So if there are a great many episodes under the Freemasonry catalog waiting for you, the Mysterious Order of Melchizedek, the Masonic Priest King, the Line of Cain, the Freemasonic Widow Son Part 1 and 2, Harpocrates Rising, and the Masonic 47th Problem of Euclid, the Masonic Goat Riders, A Question of Initiation, and then there's The Secret Destiny of America, Parts 1 and 2. There might also, if you're interested in all this stuff, there might also be some Genesis in the Genesis category that you might like as well. While you're there, hit up my social media links. I would love to hear from you guys. They're at the bottom of the pages on the website. Hey, and if you like this topic and the topics that are going to be following, and you're looking for some reading material, I would suggest to check out my latest graphic novel, The Ages. You find it on the website, where you can find information and links to all of my books. Pick up a T-shirt, sign it to the mailing list, etc. Please find the regular Abercast podcast. It's out there everywhere fine podcasts can be found. And we would appreciate a 5-star rate and review on this limited series on iTunes or wherever you're catching the show. Thank you. I've been John Towers. This has been The American Sermon. And yeah, thanks. Thanks for tuning in. Let me know what you think about the show. Hey everybody, thank you for listening to the American Sermon. I appreciate it. Hey, if you guys like this stuff, you can always tune into the Abercast. You can find the Abercast in any pod app there is out there. iHeartRadio, all that stuff, it's out there. You can ask Alexa to play it. She'll play it for you. Oh shit, I just woke my Alexa up. Hey, and don't forget to play along. We have a Vessel of the Art giveaway coming up. What you need to do is 5-star review. Post a screen pic of your 5-star review on iTunes. You have to post it up on Instagram. Tag a friend that would like the show. Tag me, Stigmata Studios, and hashtag Vessel of the Art. We'll do a drawing to win this awesome mason jar with the Abercast logo on it. We'll do a drawing on our Facebook Live show called The Gin Joint on March 20th. We'll do another one on April 17th, I think. Ooh, yep, April 17th. So those are the 2 dates for the winners right now. So join us there. Facebook, the Abercast Facebook page is pretty easy to find. Abercast on YouTube and Stigmata Studios on Instagram. If you don't like Facebook, it'll be simulcast either on YouTube or Instagram. I'm still trying to figure that out. I have multiple cameras, just trying to figure out the best way to do it. Yeah, so thank you. Don't forget to check out the website, abercast.com. There's social media links all towards the bottom. I always love hearing from you guys. And don't forget, when you're at the abercast.com, stop into the mailing list link and sign up. We'll send you some free business there. Thank you guys.